You are lying next to her. She's asleep, or she's pretending to be asleep. You're not sure which anymore. The room is quiet. The marriage is quiet. Everything is quiet in a way that has been growing for months, maybe longer, and neither of you has said a word about it. 3 months. You didn't count the days, but you know. And lying there in the dark, the question you've been circling for weeks finally lands fully. Is this just what happens now? Or is something broken in your body, in the marriage, in you? And the worst part isn't the silence. The worst part is that you can't tell if she minds, and you're too afraid to ask. Because asking means admitting that something has changed, and admitting it makes it real. I'm Marcus, and if you're a man over 60 who's lying awake in that silence, whether with a partner beside you or in a house that's become very quiet, what I'm about to say is the honest conversation nobody in your life has been willing to start. Before we go anywhere, let me describe who's actually in this room right now. Because life without sex after 60 is not one experience, it's at least three. And all three are being ignored by everyone pretending to talk about this topic. Group 1. The drive has significantly decreased. You're not suffering, but you're also not entirely sure who you are without this thing that ran your life for 40 years. The silence isn't painful, it's disorienting. Like waking up and realizing the background music you never noticed has stopped. Group 2. The desire is still there. The body isn't cooperating. This is the one nobody talks about honestly. The gap between want and can, and the shame that lives in that gap. The 3 a.m. lying awake not from lack of desire, but from fear of failing the person next to you. Performance anxiety in its most private, most devastating form. Group 3. You're in a relationship where both of you have gone quiet. The sex has become less, or stopped, and nobody started the conversation. So now you're living in this silence pact, this unspoken agreement to not talk about the thing that has changed, because talking about it means looking directly at what might have changed between you. 3 rooms, 3 different silences. All 3 are real, and every single one of them has been treated as something to endure, rather than something to understand. Today, we understand it. Here's the first brutal truth. And it's the one the most popular videos on this topic completely skip. They tell you, libido decreasing after 60 is liberation. It's freedom. You're no longer a slave to your biology. And for some men, that's true. For some men, the quiet is genuinely welcome. But for millions of men at 62, 65, 68, the drive doesn't disappear. It just shifts, gets quieter, less urgent, more selective. The body responds differently. Not never, differently. The desire outlasts the performance, almost always. Which means the man lying awake at 2 a.m. isn't lying there because he doesn't want anything. He's lying there because he wants something his body is no longer delivering on demand. And the gap between want and can is where the real suffering lives. The need hasn't changed. The key to meeting it has. And nobody gave you a new key or told you the lock was different. That's what this video is. The second brutal truth is this. The change in your sex life after 60 is not what's damaging your relationship. The silence about it is. Here is what the silence pact looks like from the inside. She stopped initiating because she doesn't want him to feel pressured. He stopped initiating because he's afraid of failing and seeing that look, the one he spent 40 years dreading. So both of them lie in the same bed, want the same thing, and each one believes the other doesn't want it anymore. The University of Michigan's National Poll on Healthy Aging found that couples who openly discussed sexual changes reported 73% higher relationship satisfaction than those who avoided the conversation. 73%. Not from fixing the biology, from having the conversation. The silence isn't protecting anyone. It's eating the connection that the biology can no longer generate automatically. Here's the third brutal truth, and this one cuts deepest. The fear isn't really about sex. It never was. The fear is about being wanted. More specifically, the fear of being in a world where nobody wants you anymore. Where the body that used to signal, I am a man, I am here, I matter, has gone quiet, and you don't know what it's saying now. For 40 years, your sex drive was your most automatic answer to that question. When the body responded, to her, to desire, to the world, it was proof. I'm here. I want. Therefore, I exist as a man. When the body stops answering automatically, the question remains. And without the automatic answer, the silence is terrifying. That question, am I still a man worth wanting, was being answered automatically by testosterone for 4 decades. Every desire was a yes. Every response was proof. Now the automatic answer is slower, less reliable, sometimes absent, and the question echoes in the silence. This is not a biology problem. This is an identity question that got dressed up as a biology problem, and it deserves a real answer. If you're still here at the 5-minute mark, you're already doing something most men won't. You're sitting with the actual question instead of reaching for a quick answer. Stay with me. The next section explains exactly why what you're experiencing happens, and why the answer isn't a pill, a technique, or a decision to accept it and move on. Let's look at what's actually happening, biologically, psychologically, and in the relationship. Because when you understand the mechanism, you stop blaming yourself. And when you stop blaming yourself, you can actually do something useful. Testosterone declines roughly 1 to 2% per year after age 35. That's not a crash. That's a gradual, decades-long recalibration. But here's what the numbers don't tell you. The decline is not uniform. Energy, drive, response time, recovery, all change at different rates for different men. Some men at 68 report a sex life that is active and satisfying. Some men at 58 feel the shift more dramatically. Research from the New England Research Institutes found that testosterone level explains only 22% of the variation in sexual activity among men over 60. The other 78%, psychology, relationship health, and communication quality, which means for most men, this is not primarily a hormone problem. It is a relationship problem wearing a biology costume. Here's the layer that almost no one acknowledges. There is grief involved in this transition. Real, legitimate grief. Not depression, not weakness, grief. A man who has been sexually active his entire adult life, who has experienced desire as a constant companion, as a fundamental part of how he understood himself as a man, is losing something when it changes. He's not grieving sex. He's grieving a version of himself. The version that didn't have to think about this. The version whose body was a reliable ally. The version whose desire was automatic proof of vitality. That grief is real, and it has never had a name or a ceremony or even a conversation. Men don't talk about this. There is no cultural script for it, so it goes underground. And underground grief, as I've said before on this channel, doesn't disappear. It shapes moods, behaviors, distances. It becomes the invisible third presence in a bedroom that used to hold only two. Now let's name the real villain, and it's not biology. I call it performance identity. The cultural script that defines a man's worth by his sexual capability. The script that says, if your body performs, you are a man. If it doesn't, you are not. This script has been running in the background of your life since you were 15 years old. It was never written down. No one handed it to you and said, here, believe this. But you absorbed it from every locker room conversation, every movie, every medical ad that framed declining testosterone as a personal failure requiring immediate pharmaceutical intervention. The pharmaceutical industry built a $3.2 billion annual market around the performance identity script, not because your body is broken, but because your shame is profitable. Here's the counterintuitive truth. Men who address the psychological and relational layer of sexual change after 60, without pharmacological intervention, report higher long-term relationship satisfaction than those who only pursue medical solutions. Because the pill addresses the performance. It doesn't address the identity. And the identity is what's actually hurting. If you're still watching at the 9-minute mark, you stayed through the diagnosis, the biology, the grief, the villain. You didn't click away when it got personal. What comes next is not motivational. It is not philosophical reframing designed to make you feel okay with something you're not okay with. It is 4 specific, honest, researched moves for the man who wants to actually navigate this, not just survive it. Let me offer you a reframe, not as comfort, as precision. For 40 years, your sexuality was driven. Testosterone drove it. Biology drove it. The reproductive imperative drove it. You didn't choose desire. Desire chose you. Every morning, automatically, without your permission. What's happening after 60 is not a loss of that. It is, for the first time in your life, the arrival of choice. When desire is automatic, it is biological. It happens to you. When desire is chosen, when you reach towards someone not because chemistry commanded it, but because you genuinely want to be close to her, it becomes something the automatic version never was. It becomes intimate. The difference between the forest fire and the bonfire. Both are fire. Both give warmth. But only one can be tended deliberately. Only one can sustain something long-term. Only one is actually yours. For 40 years, your body told you who to want and when to want it. The decision was made for you before you were conscious of it. After 60, for the first time in your adult life, you get to decide. That is not a loss of drive. That is the arrival of conscious choice in a domain that was previously entirely managed by chemistry. Some men experience this as loss. That is valid. Some men experience this as liberation. That is also valid. But every man who engages with it honestly, rather than avoiding it or pharmaceutical patching over it, discovers something they didn't expect. That the connection available on the other side of the chemistry is deeper than anything the chemistry alone could produce. Move 1. Name the grief before it names you. The grief of sexual transition in your 60s is real. The man who pretends it isn't real is the man it hollows out slowly from underneath. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to make it a moment. But you do need to name it, privately, honestly, before it starts expressing itself as distance, irritability, or the particular flatness that comes from carrying something with no name. Action. Find 10 minutes this week. Sit with the specific question, what specifically have I lost, or fear losing, that I haven't allowed myself to grieve? Not sex in general, something specific. The spontaneous desire that surprised you, the certainty in your body, the version of yourself who didn't have to think about this. Name it. It doesn't need an audience. It needs acknowledgement. Move 2. Break the silence pact. One sentence at a time. The silence pact doesn't break with a big conversation. It breaks with one small sentence. The first one. which is the hardest. The research on this is unambiguous. Couples who initiate even one honest conversation about sexual change after 60 report dramatically better outcomes than those who don't. Not because the conversation solves everything, but because it establishes that this is a topic that exists between you, that it can be spoken, that you're both in it together. The sentence doesn't have to be profound. It can be as simple as, "I've been wanting to say something, and I haven't known how to start." That's the sentence. That's it. The conversation that follows it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to happen. Move 3. Separate intimacy from performance. This is the one that requires the biggest cognitive shift. For most of your adult life, physical intimacy and sexual performance have been the same thing. Interchangeable. One implied the other. After 60, they separate. And the man who understands this discovers that one of them is still fully available to him, regardless of what the other is doing on any given night. Touch that isn't goal-directed. Physical presence that isn't building to anything. Closeness that doesn't require performance to justify it. This is not consolation prize intimacy. This is, for many couples, the deepest physical connection they've ever had, because it is no longer managed by urgency. It can actually be felt. Move 4. Decide what you actually want, then pursue it honestly. This is the move that requires the most from you and returns the most. There are legitimate choices here. All of them require honesty. If you want to address the physical decline medically, testosterone therapy, medication, other interventions, that is a legitimate choice. Make it from information and genuine desire, not from shame. Shame-driven medical decisions are not the same as self-care. If you want to explore what intimacy looks like when it's no longer driven by automatic desire, that is a legitimate choice. One that requires the conversation in Move 2. But it leads somewhere real. If your desire has genuinely quieted and you want to accept that and redirect that energy, that too is a legitimate choice. Not surrender. Sovereignty, as I call it. The one path that doesn't work. The silence pact. The one that keeps you lying awake at 2 a.m. asking a question you've decided not to answer. Whatever you choose, choose it consciously, with information, with the conversation, with your eyes open. That is what sovereignty actually looks like in this domain. I want to say something before we finish. Not about the data, not about the science, something about the question you brought into this video. The one from the bedroom at 2 a.m. Is something broken? In my body? In the marriage? In me? Here is the honest answer. Your body is changing. That is not broken. That is time. Your marriage may be carrying the weight of things unsaid. That is not broken. That is the silence pact. And silence can end the moment someone chooses to speak. And you, the man asking the question, are not broken. You are doing something extraordinarily rare. You are asking the question about your own life honestly, without looking away. Most men never do that. There are thousands of men tonight in that same bedroom. Same clock, same ceiling, same silence, same question. And every one of them is going to lie there, going to carry it alone, unless someone, somewhere, starts the conversation. You started it tonight by being here. Intimacy was never only about the body. It was always about the choice to be known by another person and to know them back. After 60, when the chemistry quiets, what remains is exactly that choice. Pure, deliberate, yours. The man lying awake at 2 a.m. is not a man whose life is over. He is a man standing at the first moment in his adult life where connection, real, chosen, undrugged connection, is fully possible. Not because the body will cooperate perfectly, because he's finally free to choose what he actually wants. That is not a loss. Tell me honestly, when you think about intimacy after 60, Is the heaviest feeling fear, grief, or something you don't have a word for yet? One word, one sentence. No judgment in this room. And I promise you, someone reading your comment tonight needs to know they're not the only one carrying it. If this conversation reached something, subscribe. Not for the number, because this community is built from men who are willing to sit in the hard question instead of clicking away. And you just sat through 16 minutes of one. This is Sovereign Male Dynamics, where the silence ends and the real conversation begins. See you in the next blueprint.